Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Younger Parkinson's Alliance podcast. This is the first of our podcasts, and I'm joined tonight by Ian, Charlotte, Pat and Russ, and we're discussing the process of diagnosis. Young onset Parkinson's is an issue for people we consider of working age. It's not to say if you're not of working age and you've retired, Parkinson's is not equally devastating. But if you are of working age, you've probably got a mortgage, you've probably got a job, you've certainly probably got a young family, and you have a whole different set of issues you have to deal with. And those are the particular audience who we're aiming this call at.
Hi, my name is Russ. I'm 48-year-old and I was diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's at the age of 40 in 2012.
Hi, my name's Charlotte Allen. I'm 52 and I was diagnosed with Parkinson's 16 years ago at 36.
Hi, I'm Ian Meaden. I was diagnosed in 2006 for the age of 41. I'm now 55 years old.
Hi, I'm Pat Salter. I'm actually aged 63, so I'm the oldest young onset here. I was diagnosed 5.5 years ago at the age of 57.
Thank you, Pat. We're going to start with a little discussion about what happened pre-diagnosis, a little bit about what sort of symptoms you may have been feeling, etc. So maybe we'll come to you first, Pat. What were you doing before diagnosis?
Well, I was working normally with a company. I had quite a senior job there. I found myself getting very tired and very lackluster. And I knew something wasn't right, but I couldn't put a finger on it. And things seemed to be getting worse and worse. And eventually I was prompted to go and get a couple of medical examinations. And it was from there I found out. But I really couldn't identify what was going wrong in the first instance.
What specifically was happening when you say you went right?
Well, tiredness was one, slowness of movement was the second. I was playing sport at the time, racquetball sport, and I was slipping down the leagues and, just not coordinating properly. I couldn't work out why I couldn't get my act together.
Okay, thank you, Pat. How about you, Russ? Similar sort of story?
Quite similar. I was starting to get very lethargic. I was also, at the time, the owner of 3 businesses, and I found running day-to-day tasks that people take for granted, like turning a screwdriver, writing things down, was becoming increasingly difficult for me.
What actually prompted you to seek medical advice?
It may sound like a very good excuse, but at the end of every month when I was doing my books, I was finding took us about 10 minutes to write a check for my suppliers.
Yeah.
So, turning a screwdriver, I was starting to lose coordination and actual being able to turn the screwdriver. My dexterity was becoming a lot more noticeably worse. And I started to develop the lean and the slow stepped walk of somebody with Parkinson's. And
coming to you, Ian, what was your story pre-diagnosis?
Well, I was doing DIY and I was just losing dexterity. I had my car radiator had a hole in it and I was going to fix it overnight and drive back to work the next morning. I couldn't fix it. I could not do it at all. So I was wiring some plugs in my daughter's bedroom. I couldn't do it at all. I lost the dexterity. And then I got a numbness in my left arm. I thought, that's time to see the doctor. My wife knew what it was. She had worked it out already, looked it up. I haven't got a clue. Never even heard of it. That was Parkinson's.
Yeah, very interesting. How about finally you, Charlotte? What was your story?
I initially thought something wasn't quite right because it was my coordination essentially and the way I was walking. I'd been widowed a year earlier and really, really lost my confidence and wouldn't go out with people, colleagues at lunchtime. And I knew something was wrong. Went to a wedding reception and I couldn't dance. Everything had just gone. I couldn't work out why, but it prompted me to go and get checked out at the GP.
Well, thank you all for that. Ian mentioned briefly there that his wife had looked it up. I'd be interested to know what conversations you'd had with your partner or your family pre-diagnosis. Charlotte, can I go back to you on that? You obviously lost your partner a year ago.
Yeah,
Did you have anyone else to talk to about it?
So being on my own, I mean, fortunately, my brother lived with me at the time with my son, Jacob, who was 5 at that time. But obviously, Parkinson's never came into any of the thoughts. Just totally shocked, totally stunned. No one else in the family had it. And of course, so young that everyone thought you were so young, didn't realise.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Charlotte. Pat, I know you're married. What sort of conversations did you or did you not have with your wife prior to diagnosis?
Well, the diagnosis was a shock to me and therefore the whole family. My wife hadn't had any idea that this could be coming on. There's no history in either of our families of Parkinson's. So we just thought it was the pressure of the job and just getting a bit tired and a bit older. And when the diagnosis came, it was a surprise to both of us.
Thank you. I can imagine what a shock it must have been. And Ian, how about yourself?
So my wife was, she noticed what was going on, and she put 2 and 2 together. She's not stupid at all. It's a horrible thing. You just don't know what's going on. And yeah.
Okay, so turning to the actual process of diagnosis. Russ, perhaps I could come back to you again.
For about the period of a year, I noticed my dexterity and coordination was diminishing. And during that period, I actually took time out, went to the GP, and initially the lack of swing in my right arm and on like the one-legged march, as I used to call it, that I was developing, was put down to something being a trapped nerve in my shoulder. And on 4 occasions, having went to the GP saying this still isn't clearing up, they very, very nearly put me under the knife for surgery to release what they thought was a trapped nerve. It was only the input of one of my friends who, on one occasion, when I was having a bit of dyskinesia with a screwdriver, and the tip of the screwdriver was going all over, that my friend said to us, you've got Parkinson's. And at the time, none of us knew very much other than the shaky person as a symptom of somebody with Parkinson's. And I think it was the 4th visit to the GP, yet again I heard, it's a trapped nerve. On my way out the door, I actually said to the GP, do you think it could be Parkinson's? To which I received the reply, don't be silly, you're far too young for that. And here we are.
What actually happened then, Russ? What happened from there? How did you?
Because of my concerns about what was going on with my movement and dexterity, she agreed to speak to the practice manager, or the practice GP as it could have been, and arranged for me to undergo some further tests, one of which being the DAT scan. And I received the diagnosis on the 4th of July in 2012.
Was that from a consultant?
It was, yeah.
And can you remember how that conversation went?
I can remember quite a bit about it. I remember walking up and down a corridor and being observed in my walk and my stance, my posture. And it was a very rapid decision when he said, I'm going to deliver you some bad news. And not knowing what that bad news was, I was told I had Parkinson's. So that was that.
Well, we'll come on in a moment to talk about how we may advise people to communicate that message. But just for now, maybe I could just come to you, Ian, and just be interested to know a little bit about what happened to you in that same sort of scenario.
My GP, he diagnosed it straight away, but didn't tell me. He referred me to Addenbrooke's hospital, neurology. I didn't even think what neurology was about. He said to me to do all the flappy things and all that sort of stuff. Saw me walking up and down the passageway, and a few people got in the way a little bit, so I wobbled a bit. I'm blaming them on me. And he said, "You've got Parkinson's." I said, "What is that? Is it, can you die of it?" So no, you won't die of it, but you might die with it. You will die with it. I don't know, comforting.
Yeah. What age were you then? You did say at the top of them.
41.
41. What job did you have?
I was a naval architect, travelling the world. I was doing quite a lot of travelling at the time. It was good fun.
Yeah.
My wife had bought me a boat the year before, my 40th, and I just thought it was a middle-age crisis. No, it wasn't.
Yeah, devastating news. Coming to you, Charlotte, what was the kind of process like for you?
It was quite a simple process for me in the fact that my GP I went to first, he thought it was Parkinson's. He recognised Parkinson's. I think he'd had it in the family. And at that time I had private healthcare, so I was referred to a Bupa hospital within a week and then diagnosed in total within about 10 days. So it didn't take me very long at all. I just remember sort of like having the MRI scan to determine that I had it, along with other tests. And it was my brother who was with me at the time I got diagnosed.
The MRI or on the other side?
MRI, yeah.
Yeah. What was the conversation like? Can you remember?
Yes, I can. It was, I've got good news. It's not a brain tumour, but you do have Parkinson's. Go away and tell me what you want to do and we'll have another meeting.
Okay, that's really interesting, Charlotte, because I was also diagnosed in a hospital, the same as you, but mine wasn't a planned appointment. I had a couple of ultrasound appointments, one for a heel, one for prostrate, and they're about 2 weeks apart, and they were done by the same radiologist. And at the second appointment, he said, "There's something wrong with you." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "I've watched you move, and you're not quite right." And I said, "You're correct. I've been feeling pretty rubbish for a while." I said, well, please tell me. And he said, "Well, it's only a guess. I've only just watched you sign something and watch you move. I think you've got Parkinson's." This was a radiologist who spotted me once, 2 weeks apart. He picked it up straight away. So I went back to go and see my family doctor. And I said to my family doctor, who I know very well, "I think I've got Parkinson's." And at that point, he broke out in a great big smile and laughed. You might think that's the wrong reaction. And what it was he was so pleased he'd got a diagnosis for me. Because about 3 years earlier, I'd been off with stress, and my facial features had never fully returned. They had been slightly flat. He'd never got that missing few percent solved. And suddenly the diagnosis of Parkinson's solved it. So he apologised for laughing, which I was quite grateful for. And he recommended me to go and then see a neuro clinician, same as Charlotte. But of course, the first thing I did is the thing you shouldn't do is go www.parkinsons on the web. And therein comes another tale from there. But when I was told, my doctor first laughed, but he did apologise, and I know him very well and understand why he laughed. So there you go.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I know that's bringing back some difficult memories for everyone. And everybody's got their own story. And I know some people in the group of young onset Parkinson's that we work with were probably aware sometime before the diagnosis they had Parkinson's. And if anything, it came as something of a relief when they found out, because it could have been something that was worse. Whereas others, it comes as a complete shock, or came as a complete shock to them. They just sort of find out at the end. So that's very interesting. Pat, at the end of your little comments there, you referred to Googling Parkinson's. I'd just be interested if anybody can give us a steer for anybody listening to this podcast who might be given a diagnosis of Parkinson's as to how they should go about that. Pat, can I come back to you first?
Yeah, I'll just lead in from there. I'd have been to see the doctor on my own and had him recognise that it probably was Parkinson's. So I had to then go back and tell my wife and family. Obviously, I told my wife first.
Yeah.
And of course, the thing I did before telling her was to go and look on the internet, which was probably the wrong thing to do looking back retrospectively. I'd have been much better off getting some advice from a proper healthcare professional who knew about Parkinson's. So I sat down, not really well prepared, and said to her, "I've got some news. I think I've got Parkinson's." Her reply was, "I'm not sure you need to edit that bit out, but that's probably the typical reply."
But, so how could it have gone better before that? What would have prepared you better for those conversations, perhaps, from a medical professional?
I think probably my doctor has got a bigger role to play here. Rather than just setting up an appointment with a neurologist, I think he should be pointing me in the direction of where I could find out something about Parkinson's that's reliable. So maybe the Parkinson's UK website or one of the Parkinson's nurses locally would have been really helpful to have spoken to before I started mentioning it to anyone, because you have 101 questions. Who do I tell? How do I tell? What do I tell? When do I tell? And I think going to the web wasn't the first place I should have gone to.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? I'm thinking back to my own situation at that time. Listening to you all introduce yourselves, some of you with Parkinson's for some considerable time, all of you for several years. Most of you are still holding down jobs, running families, having some ambitions, doing lots of sporting events, lots of exercise. So I think it's difficult in those early days when the diagnosis comes to sort of think that you will develop some sort of normality with the thing, albeit obviously we'd all rather we didn't have it. But coming back to that sort of medical support you could be provided with, or other support you could be provided with prior to speaking to your family, etc. Anybody, any other thoughts on that? Charlotte, what about yourself?
I think personally it would be helpful if there was some sort of structured framework, maybe a 30-point checklist. I don't know. So everyone got the same opportunity and was told in the same way.
Yeah.
So it's consistent. And if those boxes all can't be ticked, then that's fair enough. But I just think there needs to be a set way of doing it, and certainly not like we're hearing it at the moment.
What about you, Ian? What are your thoughts?
It's an extra one really to the subject. But if you my bank and mortgage company, they said to me, if I was diagnosed with some critical illness, Parkinson's included, then I was get mortgage sorted out.
Yeah.
So it's got to be done within 3 months. This particular one, but for God's sake, check it. It's a big amount not to get.
Yeah, good advice. Which could be one of the things on the checklist, really, to check whether you have insurance for those kind of conditions. Yes. So helpful. How about yourself, Russ? As someone running a couple of businesses and you're used to communicating with people, how do you think we could communicate this message better for those who come after us?
It's a difficult one, Neil, because everyone's different. Everyone interprets their diagnosis differently, and the way that people deal with that diagnosis is going to therefore be varied from person to person, much like the condition itself. When I was first given the opportunity to go, or the referral to go for further tests, I can remember walking into the hospital and the letter with my time, date, and who I was meeting was referring to the outpatients. So I went to the main outpatients and they said, "Oh, no, it's the day centre you need." So bearing in mind, with Parkinson's, I had a bit of a non-existent right-hand side. I was leaning, I was shuffling. As I walked into the day centre outpatients, which is the same part and of the hospital, I handed the man the letter, said, "I've got an appointment." And the receptionist said, "Do you know why you're here?" And I started looking around the room, and there's people in wheelchairs, people of a lot older age than I was at the time. And all of the information, little pockets for the leaflets, all had information about stroke. So I was thinking, good God, do they think I've had a stroke? What am I getting tested for? And it was only at that point was I aware of something not being right. I did think I'd had a stroke. I thought I had a brain tumor because my mum passed away 10 years prior to that with a brain tumor. So the way that the information and the support could have been given, perhaps we could have had like a buddy system within the hospital. So there's somebody that you could go to if you so desired to learn from their experience and introduce you to a life with Parkinson's from then on.
Yeah. And if we look at that life post-Parkinson's, Russ, you're someone who seems to have got some control over what you're doing. Certainly my interactions with you, you're a very positive person. They go ahead. What's got you to that stage in those couple of years post-diagnosis? Have you sort of planned to get here? What actions have you taken that's got you to the state you're in now?
I had two choices, and one choice was very close, which was not to be here. And the other choice, which I took after being down in the darkest of dark places for quite some time, I thought, right, time to face up to what I've got. And therefore, from facing up to that, I've decided to help other people in this situation.
Yeah, well then you're glad you didn't take the other choice. And have you ended up trying new things and doing things you maybe wouldn't have done with Parkinson's?
I've tried everything. I've lost my fear of heights. I've lost. I've lived more of a life, I'd say, post-diagnosis than the time before. Yes, I've got history. I've got a couple of very young children at the time when I was first diagnosed. Yeah. But my life afterwards has completely changed my outlook on life. I've met Charlotte, and she's been an absolute rock for me and got us back to myself, as it were.
Yeah, it's a great story, good advice. And coming to you, Charlotte, it's strange what Parkinson's throws up, and it's clearly thrown the two of you together, us and yourself. How you've obviously had Parkinson's for quite some time from your introduction. What advice would you give people in terms of the way you've handled it and got your act together, really?
Yeah, like Russ says, you've got two choices: to carry on and deal with it, or not be able to deal with it. And unfortunately, some people do choose that route. But I'm a fairly positive person. I'd say I'm quite career-minded, so I put a lot of my things that I'm able to do because I've continued to work. I know some people aren't able to work, but for me personally, to be as busy as I am all the time, I think that contributes a lot to the way I handle my condition, really. And, you've got to be positive, haven't you? Good comes out of bad. And it's the worst thing in the world, being diagnosed with a critical illness. But yeah, there's lots of support out there that people can get. It's just knowing where to reach the support, but we'll hopefully be there to hand it over to people where they can find help and, deal with it in a better manner.
Yeah, people often ask me, what's the difference between young onset Parkinson's and Parkinson's for older people, which is the most common form of Parkinson's. And I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think trying to hold down a job, some of us with young families, mortgages, as Ian's talked about, and all sorts of other issues, relationship issues and things, which maybe we'll come to later, which, are different if you're in your 30s, 40s and even 50s and still working. Pat, you were a little bit older when you were diagnosed, but you've also run your own business. What advice would you give to people for the kind of control you've taken over your situation?
Well, I can identify with both what Russ and Charlotte were saying, especially Charlotte. I also am fairly career-minded, but I had a dependent family when I was diagnosed, so teenage daughters, and it's their time of life. They're out to enjoy things. I didn't want my diagnosis to get in the way of them having their life growing up and enjoying fun. And I used work as a medium to some extent be an ostrich and bury my head in the sand about Parkinson's. So you can use work as an escapism. I think you've got to recognise that you are changing and you will change, and it is a condition which moves you on. So make use of the time you've got in the best manner.
Yeah.
So I changed jobs from being a corporate job to a self-employed job, which gave me a lot more freedom in terms of what I could do with my time and how I did it.
Yeah.
I was lucky I got some good work, and I changed the balance of work, which I did. People might call it selfish, but you could call it indulgent, or you could just call it living life. I was a better person for doing that. And like Russ and like Charlotte and like probably Ian, I also ended up doing things I wouldn't have done. So I've never done any volunteer work before. I started up something called Fighting Fit with another colleague, which might come to another occasion, but it's to help people with Parkinson's. So a lot of these things I would never have done without having Parkinson's. So whilst it's got some downsides, there are some upsides to it as well. I found new bits of life which I wouldn't have found elsewhere.
Ian, and again, you're someone who's got a control of things, Ian. You've been diagnosed for quite a few years.
Yeah,
what advice would you give?
Diagnosed 14 years. The first 9 I was still in employment, fighting hard to get a job when you've got a condition. Then last time I was made redundant, my industry, which was oil and gas, was going to be there forever. Died, totally crumbled.
And Charlotte referred earlier to, I think I'm right, Charlotte, in saying your advice was to people should work if they can, which I would certainly agree with. Your thoughts on that, Ian? You worked for 9 years. Is that...
Yes, absolutely, yes. Being at home for the last 5 years, it's done me head in, as I say. I need to work. I suppose I was wrong that I didn't go for anything that was available. I just went for what I knew. I was a professional engineer, so I should be able to find something there, shouldn't I?
I used a little trick when I worked, I still do. I work with a colleague as a consultant, and the colleague knows all about my Parkinson's, and he watches what I do in the room, and he's the one who writes on the flip chart, and he's the one who takes the notes, and I just do the presentations, and I don't stand up, I sit down. And if I'm getting occupied, and he gives me a code word, and I sit up straighter and start reacting differently halfway through the day.
Yeah, good tips.
So he's my kind of work buddy, and he tells me at the end of the day, either you were great or you were rubbish back. Get yourself together.
Looking forward a bit, looking forward from that period of time in each of our lives, what are people's thoughts? Often when people are diagnosed, they're not sure whether to tell their family straight away or their friends or their colleagues at work. And in terms of giving a steer to people who maybe listen to this podcast, who maybe have just been diagnosed, what advice would we give people on that process in terms of, it's going to be different for everyone, but what did we experience in telling family, friends, work? Charlotte, well, how about you?
Unfortunately, what I tend to what I found when I got diagnosed was everyone was, help, can they do anything for me? Can they? I turned in overnight into somebody who, unfortunately, they felt couldn't do lots of things for myself.
Yeah.
So I'm always quite positive that do everything you can for as long as possible, like stairs and all sorts of things, or do as much as you can and ask for help when you need it, because all your family members and friends seem to think from that day onwards you can't really do anything for yourself. So they need to really adjust like a person who's just been diagnosed. So the family and friends need to adjust and almost go with you until you need the help or reach out for the help you need.
My own experience, I found that I used to be very open. Even today, I've adapted this because I used to be very open in telling people who I met. And I found it was something they often found very difficult themselves. They didn't quite know how to react. And I tend not to be as open now, not because I've got any issue with it, but if I meet new people, I kind of let them work it out for themselves rather than sort of come out with it because they just don't know what to say sometimes. That's if they even understand what Parkinson's is. But anyway, further thoughts on that from you, Russ?
It's a difficult situation because you want to be open and honest with everyone, family, friends. But like Charlotte's just said, it's a journey. It's not only you that's on the journey since diagnosis. This is a massive upheaval for friends and family who are around you. And it's a case that when you get your diagnosis, it often seems like it's not just you who's been diagnosed with the condition. Everyone around you is now connected to Parkinson's in some way. And it's the situation where I had 2 young children. Do I tell them? Don't I tell them? Because they'd obviously noticed a bit of difference in my walk, in my stance, in my facial expressions, which can sometimes seem like you've got a mask on and look miserable, and inside you're laughing, but outside people don't see that. With regards to family seem to take it and accept you a lot better. With regard to friends, it is genuinely a difficult period because you sharply learn out who your friends are through thick and thin.
Actually,
you certainly do. Sorry, Pat.
No, I think, Russ, what you say about you find out who your friends are as well. When you tell people, I think you have to make the running, meaning you've got to explain how you feel and how you want to be treated. And as you say, friends who are sometimes, quite loud and cheerful and happy don't know what to say. And those which are the quiet ones suddenly come out and hold a really deep conversation with you. So people come over in different ways, but it's you that looks in the mirror and manages it. And I think you have to work out for yourself when's best to go and tell both friends, family and work. There's that whole thing. I told our family almost straight away. I had 2 teenage daughters. We said, I've got this. It won't change because of it. I'll be a bit slower. Things will be a little bit different. And I went back and picked up my iPad after I'd spoken to one of my daughters, and she'd been on the iPad, and she looked up a question, life expectancy with Parkinson's. So I looked at the answer, and it said about the same as normal. And she'd obviously looked at this and thought, well, okay, Parkinson's isn't so bad. I can move on in my life. And I was pleased that she did. So it hasn't been an impact on our family immediately. They've just watched it come along slowly. But friends, you have to go engage when you tell them. I think different friends at different times. And if you tell one, you've told a group of friends.
Yeah, good advice there.
Yeah.
Ian, how about you?
Well, I look around the table here and I recognise that we're all still happy with our families. So a lot of people I know, a lot of Parkinson's people are separated. And it seems such a shame.
How did you find this, Charlotte?
Well, I was quite upfront with everybody. I was self-employed at the time, so I told all my staff that I worked with, told my family immediately. But it's always the clients that I deal with, because I work in recruitment and I've got tens of thousands of clients. And I sat and thought, oh, how's this going to affect my work? But gradually now, all my clients know that I have Parkinson's, and they understand if I send them the same email twice what I'm doing. And I think that I'd like to get the word out a bit more in the corporate community about what it's like to live with Parkinson's, and really go to some social events, sit on some round tables, and just talk to people. Really tell them what it's like.
Yeah. Well, you're telling them today, so hopefully this will help that. And I think what is clear is that the family are going to make that journey with us as we go on that Parkinson's journey. And key message, I think, to sum up what you've all said, is it's not the end. I mean, one takes a different path at that point of diagnosis, but it's certainly not the end by all means. Has anybody had any success in, or either through them directly or through their partner, finding support for partners? You mentioned the Fighting Fit program. Maybe you could kick us off, because I think that is often for a couple, isn't it?
It's a weekend course of 2.5 days, run in 2 areas, one in Aylesbury, one in Leeds, about 6 times a year. And it's for either individuals with Parkinson's or couples with Parkinson's. And we get about 20 people on the course, each course, of which 5 or 6 couples normally make up the numbers. And the idea is to give people an immersive course for a weekend. And they're all working age people. And they do all of the things you just mentioned, several tastes of exercises, lectures by nurses, Parkinson's nurse on medication, nutrition, emotional well-being, working skills for life, what's out there, where you can get help. The most important thing they do is make friends on that course with people of their own age, their own backgrounds, which they may not have locally back home. And we put them on a WhatsApp group at the end so they keep in contact. And those WhatsApp groups are always very, very active. We now have 5 of them. We've put 120 people through the course so far. And one thing we do is we encourage partners to come. We have some partner-only sessions when the partners get a chance to speak about what it's like living with a person with Parkinson's and how hard that is, which is incredible. And really, they very rarely get a chance to speak to people in the same position and share their hopes, fears, concerns, and upsets. And, we've had some really strong messages come out of that and some good learnings and some people going away with their lives changed into a different direction.
Any other thoughts on that, of how partners may have received some support and advice we can give others?
From a partner's perspective, you just got to go with the flow. They're individuals. If they choose to stay or choose to leave, that's their choice. You would certainly hope that they'd stay around, but it's not always the case. Although everything sounds negative, things for me have certainly turned into a positive. I've met some fantastic friends and colleagues within the community. I've met Charlotte. I've had some really, really, really positive moments since being a person with Parkinson's. And for me, yes, I've went through the dark stages, but boy, was the light at the end of the tunnel. And that light is definitely worth hanging on in there for.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very well said. And this whole thing of partners came home to me when I attended a Parkinson's UK course soon after diagnosis, and I'd gone through a period of thinking maybe I had a brain tumour or even motor neuron, which somebody had thought I had at first. I was actually quite relieved when I was diagnosed with Parkinson's, given what the other things could have been. Was in a sort of slightly euphoric phase to some extent. We went to this program, my wife and I, and she was actually all upset and even introducing herself at the beginning. And somebody at coffee said to me, how long has your wife had Parkinson's? And I said, well, she hasn't. I said, well, why is she here then? I said, well, I've got Parkinson's. He said, oh, I thought it was your wife. And it sort of brought it home to me that the impact was actually greater on her than me, which I'm sort of slightly ashamed to say, but sometimes those sort of things bring them out, really. So, and I think you speak very well, Russ, about the impact it has on partners, and this is something we're in together, really.
Because it's such a lot to take on to be diagnosed and be on a course next week. I don't think you can take it on. And don't mean just a person with Parkinson's. I also mean the partner as well has got a lot to take on.
Yeah.
So I think there is a necessary period of time to go through when you're first diagnosed to actually start understanding what it really means, the scope and breadth of it, how much of your life it touches, and how you can cope with it. And that takes a little bit of time to come to understand for each person.
In terms of looking forward from here, what's us and others have talked about things they've done and wouldn't have done without Parkinson's. What sort of ambitions have people got from here? Sometimes many years on from diagnosis. What are people's thoughts? Who wants to go first on that one?
Looking forward to the future. I see it as being a very bright future for Charlotte and I, as well as from a personal perspective. We've both got each other. We both enjoy similar things. And we're both part of the community. We've been out to Kyoto for the World Parkinson's Congress last year. We've got the one in Barcelona to look forward to. Not that that's our only places that we go to. We've got a holiday booked for later on this year, pending flight clearance from the COVID. But from a person with Parkinson's perspective, we've accepted our condition and we're still living life to the full, if not living a fuller life to the fuller. Yeah.
Does anyone else feel that experiences that you would have experienced pre-diagnosis are somehow all the more real, all the more special post-diagnosis? Anybody find that?
Absolutely, it's Pat. And I think you think you mean to get on with things, now you just get on and do them. And I've done some things I would never have done before I would have probably flogged away on the corporate ladder, keeping the career and waited till the retirement age. And I said, no, I'm going to do some of these things I want to do. So I went salmon fishing in Russia, which sounds like a book, but it isn't. I went cycling twice in Southeast Asia, did 900 kilometres one time, 1,000 kilometres a second, in 2 separate holidays. I'm still looking for another big trip to go and do this next year, COVID allowing. So I try and do one big trip at a time, a bit like you with your walking, Neil, around the Pilgrim's Trail. So I think you do these things.
Yeah, I've certainly really enjoyed the long distance walking, and I now find myself at age almost 60 in the bizarre position of potentially going to play football for Wales, Parkinson's team, and table tennis for GB team. So who knows that these things emerge when Parkinson's is first diagnosed. Any thoughts on that, Charlotte? Clearly you're a big part of Russ's future there. Hopefully he's a big part of yours.
Yeah, we just bumble along together, and I don't know what people must think when they see the two of us, because like you say, everyone notices you walk funny, but there's two of us doing it together, so we just think, I don't know, we just get on with it, really. At the start, the visible thing was a real big problem for me, but now it's all about sort of like quality of life and living life to the full and helping other people. I see our future's very bright, and just want to spread the word globally about having Parkinson's is not the end of the world.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for your openness and honesty on this call. And in concluding the discussion, I'd just like each of you to give a piece of advice that you'd like to have received when you were diagnosed. Hopefully that'll help others who come after us. Maybe we could start with you, Charlotte.
My bit of advice for somebody being newly diagnosed with Parkinson's is to keep moving, take regular exercise, and eat a healthy diet.
Excellent. Thank you. How about yourself, Ian?
I think it's to have good community spirit, to drink lots of water, and for the rest of the life you get.
Thank you, Ian. Pat?
Well, I would cheekily advise two things. The first is only get information from a reliable data source, so Parkinson's UK, Parkinson's Nurse, but people who are qualified in Parkinson's.
Yeah.
And the second, get yourself into a routine, be it for medicine, be it for diet, be it for exercise, because Parkinson's likes routine. Get yourself in a routine and keep a target.
Thank you very much. And finally to you, Russ.
My bit of advice is to keep a positive mental attitude.
Yeah.
Keep smiling. Keep the adrenaline flowing, and do something each day that scares you.
Excellent. Well, I don't think I can follow that, so we'll call it a day there. Thank you, everyone. That's been a really enjoyable discussion. Thanks for taking the time. Bye-bye.